the average buck in America, in most habitats, is programmed to be an 8-point deer, about 125, 130 inches. That's what the average whitetail is geared up to do. The challenge, and particularly in a hunting club situation, any hunting situation, is to not harvest those LeBron James, those flyers on the tail end of that distribution, because those are the super exceptional ones. And those are often the ones that, hunter will shoot, and they'll bring me the jawbone, and I'll tell them, I said, that's a 2-year-old, that's a 3-year-old. No way in the world. I'm like, I'm sorry, guy, that's what it is. We can argue until the cows come home, but that's what the jawbone reads, and
that is why it is critically important to age your deer based on body characteristics, not by antler. Don't have your antler restrictions thinking you're protecting that age class, because you're protecting some of that age class, but some of the better ones are going to exceed those antler requirements. Learn how to age deer on the hoof, and if you're deciding to go 3.5, 4.5, whatever your goal is, when the body says to shoot it, that's when you decide to take it. Particularly if it says it's a 4.5 or 5.5 and it's underperforming as far as its antlers. That's the one you want to take out. It might not reach your antler goal criteria, but it's also never going to reach that antler goal criteria.
And they consume a disproportionate amount of feed. They bully other bucks. There's some suggestion they may even exclude bucks from setting up home ranges because they're so dominant and so old. So there's a lot of reasons to harvest these.
There's some bucks out there that in a lot of habitats that won't go 120 at maturity. And if you set a goal of 120, you are protecting that buck throughout its entire life.
Well, real quick, I got one more question on the antler restriction and stuff like that. Which, by the way, there's this one 2-year-old in our place who, out of let's say we've got 20-ish different bucks located, he's probably top 5, and he's definitely 2.5. And I'm just like, ooh. Now, when it comes to antler restrictions specifically, this is something I've always wondered about. A lot of places, growing up, it was 4-point or better outside the ears on our club. And then a different club, it was 3 or better. On most of our public land in Alabama, it's 3 or better on one side.
Yep.
On our SOAs, it's 18-inch main beam or a 16-inch inside spread. Is one type of antler restriction more effective than another one for protecting those LeBron James bucks that you're wanting to get forward? As opposed to 3 on one side, he's got to have an 18-inch main beam instead.
By the way, probably offending people. We should say Michael Jordan.
Michael Jordan.
I mean, LeBron, Michael. Yeah, it's a conversation.
Yeah, so
Tom Brady bucks.
Yeah, so there's no antler restriction that's perfect, right? They're all flawed in some way. That's why harvesting by age is far better. Straight up point restriction is probably the least useful in those, because you can have some young bucks that meet the point restriction.
Jacob's killed a bunch of them.
A bigger spread, a bigger spread, or particularly main beam length. Main beam length is going to be much more correlated with age than points. So main beam length and spread are better than points. Not great, because there's still some exceptions to those rules, but antler point restrictions are really just a baseline. What I like to tell clubs is, try to harvest by age. If you want to set a minimum of points and spread and all that, that's fine. But I would also have a buck that's fully mature with less than, in other words, have some categories so you can pick up some of these other bucks that need to be harvested.
It all depends on your hunters. Hunters can count to 3, typically. So that makes it easy if it's 3 points on the side. If they're very, very inexperienced hunters and you want to protect some of your bucks, give them something simple to look at to get them started. And then looking at estimating age spread or estimating main beam length. They can learn that through time, but try to wean them off of those antler point restrictions or those antler restrictions and wean them onto the age restriction based on body characteristics, because that's the key to getting them in the older age classes.
I think one of the best things that I could recommend for hunting clubs is, because mistakes will be made every year, right? Some mistakes, some deer can not be taken. There's a good chance you've got trail camera pictures of that deer. Go back after the season, have a postseason wrap up, and try not to wrap Johnny's knuckles too hard unless he's done it every single year. There's always those repeat offenders you got to watch out for. But just say, hey, let's go back and look at the trail cameras. Why did you think he met the age requirement? Can't you see? In other words, use that as an example to teach and to show and share those things with people. Hey, these are good examples of 2-year-olds. These are good examples of 3-year-olds. Look at the body. Don't look at the antlers. Share that intel. Test each other. If you harvest a deer that you thought was 120 inches and he's 105, go back and say, how did I miss that? In other words, use your own deer and your own imagery, which you have tons of, to teach yourselves better to be able to age and judge those deer on your farm or your property. So that we do that all the time. We test ourselves with trail camera stuff after the season and say, what did we miss? You know,
And be very careful with any type of penalties that you impose on them, because if you get too restrictive and the penalties you get too severe, it's going to take the fun out of hunting. People are going to be worried to death if they pull the trigger. Is that deer big enough, or am I going to get fined? 2 or 3.
or deer left in the woods, even worse. So
Check it on the ground.
one thing that really I think helps frame this is, a lot of hunters watch hunting TV. And they've seen a lot of South Texas stuff, and every deer looks like a Muy Grande, right? Small bodies, big antlers. And there are some giant deer in Texas. I love Texas. Did cut my teeth in a lot of research in Texas as a young biologist. But the research has been done over and over and over, and it surprises people. And I'll ask you the question. If you said, all right, in the very best habitat, they call it the Golden Triangle of South Texas, the section of the best habitat, the average mature buck antler size, gross, Boone, and Crockett, what would you think? I'm talking about 5, 6, 7-year-olds in the best habitat in Texas.
135 inches.
Yeah, I'm going to say probably about 130.
129 to 132 is the range.
Really?
Study after study after study. So the average buck, even in South Texas, isn't that great. In fact, some research was done years ago. I think it was done by UGA, where they looked at the age-for-age antler size from bucks from our better ag areas of Georgia, Mississippi, and South Texas. And guess who had the smallest antlers per age class? South Texas.
Okay.
So Mississippi and Georgia, in their better habitats, produce better deer age class for age class than South Texas. South Texas wins because they have 10, 20, 50,000 acre ranches, intensive feeding, low harvest pressure. They win by other ways, not because their deer are necessarily better than ours. So
and a lot of their deer get the chance to get into the 4 or 5.
That's what I'm saying. They're select.
Class,
Yeah,
right?
A lot of the deer, or not a lot, but some of the deer I have are 7, 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old bucks from South Texas. Who gets we used to have a trip to the King Ranch, the famed King Ranch. Cutie May had a relationship with the senior biologist, Mickey Hellickson, there for over a decade. So for 11 straight years, we went down there for a week each year. It was one of the best weeks of my life. We did helicopter deer capture work, and then we drove around the King Ranch shooting cull bucks on 800,000 acres.
And coyotes and
and
hogs.
coyotes and hogs and Nilgai antelope.
Yeah.
So it was like having keys to the kingdom, right? A week hunting trip on the King Ranch, shooting everything but good deer. So our goal was fully mature bucks under 110-inch Boone and Crockett. You think, how many of those would you find on the King Ranch, right? Fully mature bucks, 110 inches or less. We filled truckloads of them. We shot them by the cordwood numbers. I mean, there was a bunch of them. So the average buck in America, in most habitats, is programmed to be an 8-point deer, about 125, 130 inches. That's what the average whitetail is geared up to do. The average human is 5'8", 5'9", 175 pounds before we get fat and old.
I break that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm just saying.
I'm a cull.
So that goes back to that distribution again. So knowing what is normal for an area, and what you try to do is if I always tell people you want to be in the top 10% of your neighborhood, age for age. So you find out who the best deer management place is near you, what they're growing age for age, and you want your deer to be like theirs. You can't compare to Iowa if you're in Alabama, so that's unfair. Mm-hmm. So you want to be the best in your neighborhood. What you can do is shift that normal distribution through habitat management, proper density management. So you want more of those deer to be a little bit bigger and a few more LeBron Jameses on the tail end of the curve. You can't shift it from Alabama to Iowa, but you can shift it considerably through intensive management. So so having realistic expectations. Back to your hunting club, you've got to let them shoot something, right? They're paying dues, they're doing their work, they're sitting in the stands, they're anxious, and there's varying levels of expertise and experience. So it's unfair for if you put me on a stand on your property, so we're only shooting 4.5 and older, 120 or better. I know what that is. I get it. I would be right there with you. The average hunter has a hard time doing that. Mm-hmm. Separating a 3-year-old from a 4-year-old, or 110 versus 120-inch Boone and Crockett. So matching the right hunters with the property is also key. And if you have a mixture of more mature hunters like some of us that are happy going 1, 2, 3 seasons without killing a buck. I don't have to kill a buck every year. I don't many years. It's not a big deal. I pass 50, 100 bucks, and if I don't see what I'm looking for, I'm cool with that. But I've killed so many that it just doesn't matter that much anymore. Early in my career, I wanted to shoot a buck every year. So younger, inexperienced hunters are going to be more trigger happy. They're going to be more mistake prone. So you have to limit that damage. And the other big leakage I see with hunting clubs in the South, well, anywhere, is their family and guest policies. That's a big can of worms. And so, you may have a very good member, but he brings his brother-in-law who's never hunted before, and he's the one that makes the mistake and shoots the buck that everybody else has passed, and it causes a lot of friction in the hunting club. Or if you don't limit the club members, and I always prefer a club membership buck limit. So you get 1 buck and 2 does for your membership. If you want to give them to son, daughter, whatever, that's fine. But everybody and your brother can't take 1, 2, because any property can only sustain the removal of so many 1 and 2 and 3-year-old bucks if your goal is to grow 4-year-old bucks. Because you lose some each age class through natural mortality. It's hard to get 5-year-old deer, even not shooting 2 and 3-year-old deer. They get harder to kill when they get older. But B, there's natural mortality causes that you lose a few. Your return on investment is not great if your goal is 6 and 7-year-old deer, unless you're in a very controlled environment like South Texas. You're not going to get many of them to that age. Just not going to do it.